Hello there guys, Daniel Childs back here again. Team selector time for the game against Brighton tomorrow in the Premier League. It's a classic 3 PM kickoff at Stamford Bridge, and given our participation in the Conference League this year, I don't think we're going to be getting many of them. But let's hope Chelsea can register their first Premier League win at home this season under Enzo Maresca. This is, I think, an exciting and fascinating game, I think, in a tactical sense, as we'll get into, because you have one team in Chelsea who are in momentum, feeling good, should be feeling confident, scoring goals off the back of 2 wins, haven't lost since the opening day against Man City, and there is a feeling of upwards momentum finally, and some feelings that Chelsea are heading in a more positive direction. But then, of course, Brighton have started the season unbeaten. It hasn't been outstanding, but it has been good. It's been strong, especially for a team with Brighton's stature and finance, especially because they struggled last year. There is a sense with Fabian Hurtzler, a very young coach. They are a well-organised, set-up machine already with some exciting players, especially in attack, and seeing how Brighton will be set up to try and counteract Chelsea's threats, how Chelsea get round that, and then how Chelsea try and stop Brighton's threats and try and get through their weaknesses. So we're going to delve into all of that. Please hit that like button, please hit that subscribe button. Go and support the guys at Alloy Collectors. You can use my discount code SonOfChelsea, 15% off to get your metal home shirt. You can get the retro one, which I've talked about a lot recently. I think it's a great collectible, but of course you can get the modern new kits that are coming up. The first kit, there's going to be an away kit coming out as well. I'm sure a goalkeeper kit too. Get over to Alloy Collectors. I think it's a great collectible for fans, for Chelsea fans, but also football fans. If you're a general football fan, they don't just do Chelsea, but specifically for Chelsea, you obviously want to get yourself one, especially of the retro shirt. I just think so well designed, customizable with the player and number you want. So get down in the description box below and use my link to get your Alloy Collectors metal home shirt 15% off at checkout. But let's get into Enzo Maresca's press conference. The big team news is obviously we knew Malo Gusto was going to be back, but also Romeo Lavia is finally back fit, which is it's a shame it's taken him so long to get back. When he had that injury after the Man City game, it was kind of cited that this isn't going to be that bad, but it felt a little bit similar to last year, if I remember rightly. It was kind of only a knock that kept him out for so long, and it dragged on and on until he barely played at all in the season. So let's hope Lavia can put that behind him now and start to perform well and perform consistently. I think the big question will be whether he jumps straight back into action. I don't think he'll start tomorrow, as I'll get into, but it's great to have him available in central midfield again and to see how he can function with, of course, Moises Caicedo, who has been in incredible form recently, of course, now coming up against his former side. The other thing to speak about is obviously Nkunku versus Jackson. Maresca's comments kind of made it seem, again, he was referring to, balance, as he spoke about post the game against Barrow in midweek. I do fear that, Nkunku needs to be in this Chelsea team. I think it's going to be a broad and big conversation because Nkunku wasn't signed and he's not really at Chelsea to play Conference League and Carabao Cup games as well as he might do in those games, and I think he will if he continues to start in them. Because he's a natural goal scorer, I think he will rack up. He'll stat pad, as some people like to say. I think he will get a lot of goals. But he is a talent worthy of playing and starting the biggest games for Chelsea. So last week we were saying Jackson versus Nkunku. I think it's more Jackson is definitely starting for obvious reasons. But then who does Nkunku replace? And we're going to get into that if he does start. Because, of course, there is clearly an instinct after recent performances that you just stick with a winning team, and I don't think many people, if they see that an hour before kickoff tomorrow, will be complaining. Let's look at Brighton. Obviously, the big story over the summer was the appointment of Fabian Hurtzler, one of the youngest coaches ever in the Premier League. I think he might be the youngest, but especially in modern time, it's incredible how young he is, and a job of that stature. Even though Brighton aren't one of the biggest clubs in the Premier League, the scrutiny compared to his previous roles is obviously going to be intensified, and the competition is stiffer as well. Obviously, so far this season, they're unbeaten in the Premier League. They've made some interesting moves in the transfer window. Matt O'Reilly from Celtic, but unfortunately for him, he got injured basically at the start. I think he was linked to Chelsea. Rutter from Leeds, who I think is a good addition, who played in kind of a central role for them. Yakuba Minter was one from Newcastle that was kind of linked as a PSR move. So they've made some interesting additions, but it's quite funny looking at the stats that Danny Welbeck is a top goal scorer so far this season with an XG of 2, so he scored 3, so he's exceeding his XG so far. Defensively, this is kind of where it comes up how structurally proficient and smart they've been, is they've conceded in terms of goals conceded per match so far this season in the Premier League, they're third. So they're only behind Arsenal and Liverpool, who obviously have had strong starts as well. I think in times they are playing a little bit more of a direct game, automatisms that Roberto De Zerbi was really keen on. But at the same time, they are a technically proficient team. And I think when we get into this game and seeing what Brighton are going to provide to Chelsea, because Chelsea obviously are a team, as we saw against West Ham, if you press up against us and your press isn't that good and isn't that coordinated, we want to get that ball usually from our goalkeeper to our centre-backs, out wide, back inside, and then usually either trying to find a run of Nicholas Jackson or use our wide players who do start very wide, especially when we're in possession. And you've got that midfield free usually, where Cucurella last week was coming into central midfield, or we've seen Malo Gusto move into central midfield. So it's not hard to figure out what Chelsea are good at so far this season. I do think there is some good variation in Chelsea's ability to actually suck opponents in and then actually spring on transition a bit more. They are a much more transitional team than I expected them to be under Maresca, and I think that's actually a positive. I think that's something that Maresca needs credit for, in the sense that, I think he has been a little bit flexible in the way he's approached. He's maybe looked at what's at his disposal, what worked last season, and trying to build from that and add some new things that maybe wasn't there last year, rather than a complete overhaul of something that by the end of last season was actually kind of working. So we've seen that attack continue to click. I think the big thing is, if you're Brighton, you're coming into this game, you've got attacking threats, but defensively you've been solid too. But of course, we know Brighton aren't exactly in their DNA to come to Chelsea and just sit back for 90 minutes. As well structured as they are still a progressive team. They still have players who want to get on the ball and want to pass around and want to move forward. I think a big thing is obviously the exclusion, that the injury to João Pedro, I think is massive, a massive miss for Brighton. It really is, because I think he's a wonderful centre forward. He's already scored some big goals for them this season. I think as a centre forward and imposing threat, I think physically he's quite threatening to opposing defenders, but as well, I think his movement, and he's just got a lot more convincing for me as a centre forward. And he's actually developed into a player I didn't think he was a few years ago. I thought he was kind of more of this diminutive, small kind of tricky winger, and he's become more of kind of a bigger, bulkier centre forward, and I think that's obviously helped him in the Premier League. So despite, of course, him missing, Welbeck can score a goal, but it's just, I think that João Pedro is just an all-round better, or kind of more suitable for Fabian Hurtzler, and off the ball, obviously that may be a problem for them if they're pressing from the front. So let's get into Chelsea. I think that it's quite funny moving from a position where for quite a while now I've been doing these previews, and from week to week it's like, who's going to start, who's going to not, what's the chemistry, where can we get link ups and injury problems, and having to rotate constantly. The funny thing is, the team is becoming more predictable. That's not a bad thing. If you have a team that's pretty predictable and pretty solid, it means you're doing something right, because the coach usually is not changing a winning team. And I don't think really, logically, you want to change too much of a winning team. I think it's slight tweaks based on players returning from injury. And then maybe, as we'll get to the centre forward or attacking area, whether you want to include someone who, like Nkunku, did really well in midweek. So Robert Sanchez in goal. He has 2 clean sheets to his name. I thought, he didn't have the best of starts to the season, especially in pre-season. He had some dodgy moments, but you've got to say, so far this season, he's been a solid goalkeeper for Chelsea. Let's hope he continues that form against his former club. That's another, of course, former Brighton player. Right back, I think Malo Gusto naturally comes back in. He played in midweek. He's kind of, you think, match fit. So I think he'll come back in when, obviously Fofana played there last week, really, when Tosin came in. I just think, get Gusto back in there. Fofana, Colwell, still the back two, keeping clean sheets, and I think that they will revert to being the back two tomorrow. Then Marc Cucurella. One of the things I want to note about Cucurella, I just prefer him in central midfield more than I do Malo Gusto or whoever the right back is. I just think it suits Cucurella a lot more. I think he's more in tune with that role. I think the balance of having maybe Enzo on the right, Caicedo central, and then Cucurella on that kind of left inside role, I just think suits Cucurella a lot better. I just think Chelsea look a more fluid team. We saw it at the end of last season. It's just a role that fits his game, I think, a lot better. It's not that Gusto can't improve on that. It's just, for me, if out of the two, who I want inverting more, it's more Marc Cucurella for me personally, and maybe we'll see that again tomorrow. In central midfield, obviously, Moises Caicedo, really the man in the moment, getting so many flowers, and rightly so, for his dominant performances. He is proving... Listen, that fee is still ridiculous, and I'm not going to sit here and say he's proving to be every bit the fee because it's an insane fee. But for what I wanted Moises Caicedo to be, a dominant, a destructive, and also an influential central and defensive midfielder, he is being that for Chelsea. So really, let's hope that continues against better quality opposition. Enzo Fernandez, I think, will start here again. I don't think Lavia will come back in, and I think that Enzo obviously now is deemed a first team player regularly for Enzo Maresca, so I think he'll start. And then we get into the attacking area. Let's start on the left, really, or let's start with the players I think will start. Basically, Jackson is obviously going to start, scored 2 goals last time. Sancho, I saw a stat that said that Sancho has the highest expected assists of Chelsea players so far this season, which is maddening given he's only made 2 appearances for us so far, so he's obviously making a creative difference for Chelsea. Then Cole Palmer, obviously centrally. I think Madueke is the one for me who would be vulnerable, but I would switch it. If Nkunku's going to start this game, I think Palmer for me would have to go out to the right, which is a conversation in itself because I don't want him too wide right. You want him getting into the box. You want him, being influential enough to move centrally. I just think that the Cole Palmer is more natural. I think Cole Palmer's better suited to going from wide to a more central role rather than Nkunku, who just for me is a central-minded player. Like, he has to be in and around the box either as your centre forward or as someone just off a centre forward. So for me, that's where Nkunku would be. My prediction is I think that Madueke will start again. I just think that Maresca will stick with a winning team and we'll see the ability of Nkunku as a massive threat, one of the biggest threats you can have off the bench in the Premier League. I will say, though, he has to be the first one off the bench. I don't want to see another situation where he's like one of the last come off the bench. And I think based on his form, he will be in the mind of Maresca that I can bring this guy on if the game's tight, for instance, which it may be given Brighton's defensive quality, and open things up later on in the game as they become tired. So that's my team. Give me yours in the comments below. I really hope Chelsea can win because obviously it's another big step, and it's a step that keeps things positive, keeps that momentum rolling. And given we're near that international break again, you want to be going into the October international break with a good feeling that this block of games were really good for Chelsea. So let's hope that continues at the Bridge tomorrow. Follow me across socials, subscribe, follow the podcast, all that good stuff. And I'll see you again very soon. All the best.